for me running this project or overseeing this project, we've got quite a number of work packages. And these work packages are actually defined since 2019 up to today. And we are hoping at least we may have some sort of a good story to tell by end of 2024. So the Shale Gas Research Project is a national strategic initiative that aims to establish regional geo-environmental baseline in the Karoo Basin in order to effectively regulate petroleum exploration and assess the potential development of shale gas in South Africa. So we believe that the important aspects of the research initiatives will include the understanding of the petroleum resource potential, particularly shale gas, and also the status of groundwater resources, and also looking at the historically abundant exploration wells and as well as the seismicity in the region. So the new knowledge and information created by all these projects that I've mentioned now will inform decision-making in the context of shale gas and unconventional petroleum resource development in South Africa, and will definitely support augmentation of upstream petroleum regulatory framework. So we have 5 work packages. Unfortunately, I didn't put this on my slide because I thought it's an oversight, but just to give you an indication of what we're currently doing. We've got work package 1, which is the drilling of pilot deep stratigraphic borehole near Beaufort West. I'm sure you are very familiar with it, which is the KDD. It's led by Council for Geoscience. They are actually nearing to the end of their drilling cycle. So surely they will be giving some sort of feedback in the near future. So we also have the work package 2, which is the evaluation of the shale gas resource. And this is led by the Petroleum Agency, SA. We are actually working on that. We are assessing the potential of shale gas, and we're also doing some sort of soil gas sampling. I don't think I'll cover that today on my presentation. So there's quite a lot of activities that is being carried out right now. And we have work package 3, which is sort of setting up of a regional baseline groundwater monitoring network. It is also led by the Petroleum Agency, and they are working in this project in collaboration with the UFs or the appointed UFs to assist them to establish this regional baseline groundwater monitoring. And we have work package 4, which is assessing the integrity and risk represented by legacy exploration wells. This is also looked after by the agency. You know that most of the wells that I'm talking about, they were drilled 50 years ago or so, and they were never proper, they were not proper information or documentation when the wells was abandoned at the time. And right now, Petroleum Agency is trying to develop some sort of a technical guidelines that is going to regulate the well integrity before and after the exploration. So we're also looking at the establishment of baseline regional seismicity monitoring network. This is led by the agency in collaboration with Council for Geoscience. They've already installed quite a few seismic seismometers or seismic stations in certain areas within the region that we are looking at. And the Council for Geoscience have for years, they've been monitoring such. So in addition to what CGS has been doing, the agency is also looking at seismicity, but focusing on the implication which may be caused by shale gas development. So additionally, we also have to contribute to skills development and research for shale gas industry, where we are engaging with various institutions, including yourselves, of higher learning on key research areas, and where possibly we can work together to respond to some of the questions addressed by these work packages. So I think that is all in all from my side, and that is just a bit of a background of who we are and how this shale gas project come about. As South Africa, you know, we've got many institutions that are working on this kind of projects, and we are integrating most of the work. We are collaborating. There are a lot of stakeholder engagement as well. And we as the agency, we are just given mandate to drive, or the money or the funds were channeled through the agency to handle these investigations and to establish the baseline studies. So we will definitely be reporting quite a number of activities in near future. So far, we are keeping it within the stakeholders and mainly the DMRE. So for today, guys, I don't want to waste your time. I can talk the whole day, but as for today, I'm going to focus on some of the positive results of the Karoo Basin and looking at the petroleum system modeling. So all in all, the basin and petroleum system modeling approach allows us to understand the distribution of petroleum components accumulated in the Karoo shales. And to achieve the project objectives of this nature, we collaborated with the technical experts in the field, the CVA engineering, I think they're based in France, and they supported us and they provided technical guidance to the technical team that was involved. And at the time I was leading the team that was working on this project. Unfortunately, now my role is more into managing and monitoring overall project components, not necessarily doing the technical activities, but I'm still involved there and there. So looking at the outline of my talk, I'm going to give a little bit background on the objectives, the Karoo Basin geology, data QC, the basin modeling, the petroleum system, and also wrap up with the common risk and segment mapping, and also give some sort of a recommendation and conclusions and recommendations. So there are quite a number of activities that we've done so far. And I think based on what I'm going to present, you can always feel free to let me know which area you want me to expand in future, because the work that I can present right now, I think we've compiled over almost 200 pages of reports, so which I cannot present everything in this hour. So by way of introduction, we know that the Karoo Basin hosted a well-preserved ecosystem hundreds of millions of years ago, which is now represented by many fossils. The basin is the largest sedimentary basin, occupying more than half of South Africa's land surface. And the basin constitutes a petroleum province with significant potential, as evidenced by numerous oil and gas shows reported since the 19th century. And today, the onshore Karoo Basin is the focus, with unconventional gas being the principal exploration target, although the potential for conventional hydrocarbon plays also exists. So far, you'll know that the agency is also conducting some studies looking at the coal bed methane, also the gas hydrates in the offshore, looking at the offshore, and also mainly the shale gas. And we know that we've got some interesting studies in the Virginia, where Tetra 4, they're actually producing gas and also helium, associated helium in that particular region. So we are also monitoring such progress. So the objective of the study was to prepare a scientifically justifiable petroleum system assessment and modeling for Karoo Basin, which we successfully achieved to the best of my knowledge. It is not perfect, but it is deemed accurate and a good step forward in developing our understanding of the petroleum potential of Karoo Basin, which is quite massive and complex. I'm sure most of you know the geology of South Africa. It's quite interesting, and there's many school of thoughts. So I'm just going to sum up what we came about with this study. And more technically, what we did was to build a database by consolidating a very large amount of different data types in order to understand the tectonic evolution of the basin in terms of uplift and erosion, together with the thermal history, and to understand where maturity windows are and what the character of source rock for petroleum generation are in the basin. So there's a lot of parameters that we had to look and identify, and also make sure that it makes a good story for us, especially when we start simulating our models. You need to have a good geological history. So in order to understand the implication for prospectivity, we also had to identify the sweet spot mapping. And these are generally defined, they define the main geological controls and risk, which I think I'll touch base on towards the end of my presentation. And lastly, the project has capacitated our geoscientists to better understand modern concept in the application of basin petroleum system modeling with the 1D and 2D modeling studies. So the project was divided into 3 phases. So which enabled us to qualitatively and quantitatively assess the data. We identify the key parameters of petroleum system and model their history, taking into account the structural effects and also the presence of doloratic intrusions. As you know, that is a big challenge in the Karoo. So phase one was mainly data review and analysis. And then phase two, we did our 2D modeling, and then we also generated the five regional cross sections, which I'll discuss in detail in the next coming slides. So phase three was mainly for us to identify and characterize the sweet spots, the areas that we think are potential for shale gas. So, and also with petroleum system, maybe I must just say, there are approaches and workflows. There is no way that you can just start a study without even understanding what approach you're going to follow and what workflows will work for your model. And we know very well that no geological model is ever complete, in particular in the case of the Karoo Basin, with little data availability, but a rich and diverse literature. I mean, we've got thousands of literature, good publications, which some we couldn't even manage to cover in this study. And I still believe that there's still a room for us to establish and translate all this information into a software, because for our modeling purposes, we couldn't do this just by mere talking or by mere looking at the seismic lines or the well data. We had to build a model within a software. So Petromod or Petrol was the main software that we used. So coming back to the geology, or just to give you a background to geology overview, I think I'm not an expert. You guys know better than I do. So we know that the deposition of Karoo sediments took place between the late Carboniferous and early Jurassic, which is about 300 to 180 million years ago. And what we know today is that the thickness of the Karoo strata vary from south to north, and most units become thinner towards the north. And really, for us, we've seen that, especially when we're looking at those northern parts sub-basins, like Limpopo, Tuli, and what do you call it, the Springbok Flats. I mean, you can see that the Karoo formation is not as thick as what we see in the southern Karoo Basin. And this map represents a simplified regional geology of the Karoo and its extent. Unfortunately, I cut some of the parts from on the top. So I'm just highlighting the areas that we were concerned about. So where you see the outline of the blue, that is the area that we focused on. And you'll see that there are some shell ERs, Falcon, Bundu, those are the existing exploration rights. However, there are no activities taking place in such areas since the moratorium is still in place. And then overall, the target interval for shale gas is in the lower Eka group, which is the three formations, the famous three formations, the Collingham, the White Hill, the Prince Albert. They're quite thin around this particular area where you see the dark brown veins going out there. That is the outline of our White Hill formation, and that is the area or the source rock that we're aiming to understand. So, as you will know, there's we need to understand the organic rich shales. So this is one of our famous schematic diagram of well CR168 total depth, and it shows the White Hill is buried at to greater depth of up to 3.5 kilometer. You can see it's somewhere right here. So this is the area that we're targeting. So you can imagine, I mean, it's over 3,000 meters depth. So we're talking about things that we don't even know what is happening at subsurface. So it is reported previously that this well intersected gas and recorded 1.84 million standard cubic feet per day for 23 hours from the fracture adjacent shale formation in 1968. So we believe that there is some active source within the area or within the region. Whether it's still available, preserved or not, that is still the story to tell. So the Whitetail Formation is of particular interest and satisfy all the basic requirements for successful shale gas play. It is rich in organic matter. Its average is 4.5%. It is thermally mature up to 4%. It has high quartz content and sufficient thicknesses for commercial development, because usually we're looking at an average of 30 to 35, and also the large areal extent of our basin and buried to depth of up to 4 kilometers in the extreme south of the basin. And additionally, we know that there are also positive indicators, which includes numerous gas shows in the Prince Albert and also underlying Dweka group in the southern Karoo Basin. So that is something quite interesting for us, that, I mean, this Whitetail Formation is comparable to the classic world producing shale gas basins in the US. So that is why everybody thinks there is something in the South African space. So now coming back to the data, believe me, this was it took us maybe more than 5 months or 6 months just to acquire data, to source data, to make sure that we QC this information. Because what I can tell you is that for you to be able to undertake basin and petroleum system modeling, you need to have a meaningful geological, geophysical, and geochemical data sets. Because without that information, you are not going to be able to calibrate or to simulate anything or your model. So you need to make sure that you acquire all this information and you make sure that it's in the right format, in a way that it's readable, in a way you can also create a base case scenario. So in preparation of our study, we compiled various information from public and private domain, and we relied mostly on existing legacy data, which is archived here in-house at the agency and also from the Council for Geoscience. And priority wells were selected for this study. You can see how they were really categorized, because this map represents the well data distribution within the basin, and the data is also ranked and categorized according to data availability and as well as confidence of measured data, meaning that we also have to look at other data which is available, the geochem data. We have to make sure that there's rock eval, there's Vitronic Reflectance, there's after data. So part of the exercise was mainly to QC the calibration data, and which is suitable for modeling. So overall, we had 25 wells which were modeled. And you can see that we had some data, I mean, some weak data for calibration in those areas where it's highlighted in yellow, meaning that some of the data were missing or the confidence was not so great because we didn't have any information. And the right data, you can see there's really lack of information. So sometimes it's very difficult for us to use such information to be able to generate our model also. So the other thing that was of interest as well is also to indicate to you that a summary of the data of thermal, of thermal calibration and attribution of confidence was also considered. And this is some of the examples of the data that I mentioned now, where we are looking at the Vitronic data. Where we're looking at the Vitronic data, we're also looking at the after data and comparing all this data from what we know, what is published, what has been produced or the operator gathered. And we had to do some sort of a statistical analysis in terms of looking at the probability of or ranking, and also understanding how maybe the data is reasonable enough for us to consider for calibration or is not good enough for calibration. So as I've indicated, 25 wells were initially identified in phase 1 as having possible value to constrain the thermal modeling. We have analyzed present day temperature, Vitronic reflectance, and appetite fishing track data, and grouped those wells into 4 different categories according to data quantity, quality, and confidence. So out of 25 wells initially selected to present a complete set of excellent data for calibration, and those wells are specifically the SA-166 and KW-167, I'm sorry. And 11 are considered useful but lack one component or have medium confidence, as I've indicated already. So 6 wells also present only limited value for calibration, mostly due to low confidence. Data of 5 wells turned out to be either absent or present, and that really presents major issues for us. And the confidence decreases with less measurements, more scattered points. For example, what we see here in Q165, we see more scattered points or smaller depth ranges if we come down to CS 367 here. So one thing that I can also maybe highlight here is that apartheid fishing track analysis or AFTER technique is very useful because it provides rigorous estimates for the total uplift and erosion of sedimentary basin, which are the key inputs to the basin modeling and petroleum system analysis. And another important parameter also in basin analysis and petroleum system modeling is Vitronic reflectance. Vitronic reflectance is an indicator of thermal maturity of source rock. So the value here is that it gives an indication where the model is good and where it is weaker. So it's very important for us to first understand what we have to be able to come up with a base case scenario or model for our study. So another interesting part or that actually was continuous even to date is the literature review. We had to make sure that we understand our geology. We understand that because what we are doing, we are actually moving towards, from time when during the Carboniferous up to present. And if we don't project the events that took place at that time, we will be giving a wrong impression of what the basin looks like. So we had to take into consideration all the publication, all the studies, all the papers that have been published about the Karoo. Some are contradictory, but in this case, we were focusing on the major events. When was the flooding? When was the dolerite intrusion? When was the kimberlite magmatism took place? And those also had effects on the petroleum or the source rock. So those are some of the important factors which we couldn't ignore for our modeling. So this is just a general modeling input and concept. This Steph, I can tell you, I can actually take another presentation to take you through our geodynamic modeling and how we came about this conclusion. And it's not complete, it is continuous because every day there's new information coming forward. So the project-wide general input and data and concepts were a geodynamic scenario derived from literature. This is what you see. All this information, it is derived from publication, which is already out there. And then also, we had to make sure that we understand the overall stratigraphy and basin-wide phases, occurrences. It was quite challenging. We end up doing some bulk grouping, but for the White Hill Formation, we used the recent Chukuma, a PhD student from UCT, who actually studied the White Hill in great detail, looking at the sedimentology. And also, what was very important for us was to take into consideration the general base-real history trends, because that is a very important factor for our modeling. You need to understand the burial history trends and also take into consideration the concept about the thermal history. And all this information cannot just be thumbsucked. It has to be on the basis of what is out there. So the previous slides where I indicated the parameters as the Vitronites, the after, those are the ones that are going to help us to answer the burial history, taking into consideration the uplift and the erosion, the concept about the thermal history. We don't know the past temperatures, and we know from publication, but we were not there, but we're working on assumptions up to present day. So with new borehole data, drilled or acquired information, that will actually help us to cross-reference what we are seeing on our model. So this is a multidisciplinary review of publication, looking at the previous models and concept and trying to make a story for ourselves. So the geodynamics and burial history evolution is considered since the Carboniferous. I think I did mention that earlier on. So that was just to give you a background history on the geodynamics. I know I didn't go into the details. We actually did more than what I'm presenting here. So because of time, I think I'll just jump quickly to our modeling. And I think, as I've indicated earlier on, there are workflows, there are approaches. Doesn't mean that what works for our basin will work or apply in Australia or will apply in the UK or will apply in the US, because we are in different environments with different conditions. So for our basin, as we made sure that we looked at our parameters that actually presented from the wells data itself. So as part of the phase 1 data QC, and for us to get accustomed with the Karoo Basin, we performed a series of 1D models. The objectives of this experimentary 1D modeling was to establish a consolidated and QC data, and also to identify possible key wells, establish a base case scenario, and also to get understanding of regional variation. So I'll give you an example of one of the 1D modeling that I'm talking about. So the idea of using 1D modeling was to make sure that actually 1D modeling has to be performed in a logical order, starting from wells with high confidence, as I've indicated, which means that we will start from SA166 to K167 to get some first understanding about the thicknesses, missing stratigraphy, and thermal modeling parameters needed for calibration. We then progressively stepped out, importing the learnings into areas of low confidence. This has been done along regional transects aligned with the overall basin structure. So if you can see, I've indicated transect 1, which is across the basin from east to west, is where most of the reliable data is located, or we were able to gather, and therefore was the most important for building up an initial understanding. It is parallel to the Cape Fault Belt in the southern part of the basin, and shows a present day west to east depending of the overall basin. And also now looking at transect 2, which is less constrained by data, particularly in its central part. You can see we've got literally nothing here in between QU160, I think it's QU165, and also this DP1 well in the northern part of the basin. So this was the most important for this exercise, was very important for us for building up an initial in this understanding. And if I can tell you, we believe that even though the transect 2 is less constrained by data, but is perceived more predictable since it follows the major structures for typical foreland basins. It is well constrained in the north by shallow wells and outcrops. So we didn't ignore these wells. We know that, I mean, from these wells, you can actually, the White Hill was thinning, and it's pinching out in those regions. Essentially, the 1D modeling allow us to understand key drivers for thermal maturity. So this is just to give you an idea how we came up with the understanding of the overall basin. So this is our typical example of 1D modeling results at selected well location with input data such as stratigraphy. You can see the table here. This is the stratigraphy table, borehole temperature. We also have the Vitronic data. We also have including measured data for calibration, and this serves as inputs for modeling. As we start with our modeling, we need to understand what would be the trends and to what extent, and the first order control. So having this information for each well modeled at all those 25 wells, we modeled each one single, producing a picture like what you see now. Here we were able to perform multiple modeling runs and generate a burial history for that particular well through geologic time. So there were a lot of questions, maybe with the burial plot, which was not making sense. We had to go and check what was our input table, what was in our stratigraphy, what was the timing, what was the, so we had to make sure that it is as accurate as possible, and also make sure that we've got good, useful calibration data also, which you can see on the right, which is our temperature, and the VR, the Vitronic data. So what you see is on the, which is a colorful block, that is our burial plot, history plot. The color coded shows areas of immature, over mature section over time. And this provides insights to complex burial history and thermal evolution of the basin. So 1D modeling has its own limitation as well, based on data analyzed at single point, and therefore we had to consider 2D modeling. So for us, 1D modeling was a step forward in preparation to 2D modeling. And it was quite challenging because the seismic data that we had was really not enough, and the way of poor quality data. I think Stefan will agree with me on this one. So we relied mostly on the well data. So, sorry. So essentially, 2D modeling aims to put all data and concept into its regional context. Generally, 2D models are based on fault and horizon interpretation of depth converted 2D or 3D seismic data. Seismic data in the Karoo Basin is of very poor quality and covers only about 10% of the basin regionally and was not used as I've indicated. Therefore, our cross sections are based on this A, B, C up to E. These are the cross sections that we generated across the basin going north, south, and also I think that we've got B, which is actually goes across the central basin. So we say that these cross sections were based on a high resolution topography, some basic outcrop limits. We know that we do have, especially when you come around the Langsberg in the Western Cape region, you can actually have some, you can see Duiker, you can see the White Hill Formation at surface. So we use that basic outcrop information, and also we relied heavily on the formation tops and average faces from about 30 wells that we've investigated. So 5 cross-section, which I've indicated A to E, for the 2D modeling have been kept pragmatically simple. We simplify them because we're looking at a wide range of kilometers. I mean, we're looking from 800 to 1,000 kilometers. Honestly, that is a bit too much. So it's our basin modeling is quite regional. So we implement 1D concept at a regional context by extrapolation and interpolation, or rather connecting 2 or more well points horizontally and vertically. So these are the cross section. I think I'll highlight how they look in a general essence in the next few slides, but this is just to show how we implemented our 1D concept and build a regional context to have a sort of understanding on a regional, both horizontal and vertically. So in a 3D sense, all this work, by the way, we did everything in Petromod. We use Petromod 1D, Petromod 2D, and you can also be able to view using Petrol software. So in a 3D sense, these are 5 2D sections, not very much constrained structurally, but constrained by well tops, topography, and outcropping formation, as I've said. But we think the appropriate data such as seismic, this might look a bit different. And again, this data serves as input to sweet spot identification and resource evaluation. So all these lines that you see, we had to make sure that they are in a format or in a manner that it will be easy for us to simulate and also to be able to run different parameter scenarios or runs to be able to generate some sort of understanding of the 2D modeling for each of those lines, looking at various parameters. Like, for example, I can talk about when we model 2D, we look at the cross-section as they are, as I'm showing you now. We look at the burial history and erosion, the compaction and pressure. We look at the thermal model, looking at the temperature, the thermal maturity, the thermal history, impact of volcanic activity. We also had to run those scenarios to be able to come up with hydrocarbon generation and preservation. And also we need to understand fluid dynamics by looking at organic porosity, gas absorption, primary migration, and gas saturation, and secondary migration, to be able to quantify all our understanding of what the data is telling us. So 2D modeling was quite intense, and it's an expertise field on its own, and one need to understand the software used to be able to run or to simulate whatever the outcome that they want to see. So this is a typical example of 2D modeling, a result of type section using well data point. So you can see is one of the line section that I indicated previously. And here you can see we've got boreholes on tops. We've got boreholes SC367, CR168, and we've got a number WE. We constrain our sections with available information or available information known to us at the current stage. And the well points data were connected to produce a geologic sound model based on literature and data available. So it was very important for us to justify what we're trying to do by the knowledge body of information, which is already in the public domain. So this represents subsurface and surface geology and its associated topography. You can see that, I mean, I cannot just generate these mountains. I had to link up with the topography. So what you see here is exactly what you see on the ground. So typically the cross-section are wide in length, ranging from 800 to 1,000 kilometers. And by doing so, huge data uncertainty exists. I mean, for example, if you see from CR168 to WE168, there's missing information here. We don't know. So we just had to extrapolate to the next word, which sometimes may not be necessarily be the case. So there's a huge data uncertainty, and it is recommended that future drilling and or any other geophysical data acquisition be considered in the region. So again, this is another example of 2D modeling results of type section across the basin. I think this is section D, if I'm not mistaken. It's the cross section D. And having this information for each cross section that we modeled, we were able to perform multiple modeling runs and generate a burial history for that particular cross section through geologic time. We also implemented some thrust faults here as reference to literature, and we could see corresponding anticlines from the geological map. Actually from surface, yes, I used the geological map to be able to link up these anticlines. And I can tell you that this is a sort of highly exaggerated, the CFB, the Cape Fault Belt, and because we need to take into consideration for our modeling, because there was some pressure that were involved here. So we don't know what happened at the time to the basin at that particular point. So we also did more detailed work on the lower acre, subdividing the phases, but the rest of the formation were bulk versus grouping. I think I did indicate. So we focus on our Collingham, Whitehill, and Prince Albert, and we try to make sure that we do some phases grouping so that we'll be able to show which are the areas of this. Is very useful when we start talking about the volumes or the hydrocarbon generation or expulsion. So you need to know which area are you talking about. You cannot just generalize, because by generalizing, I won't be giving useful information to the stakeholder also, because it will be just a thumbs up or random. So I need to know, even for future drilling, which are the best potential area to consider. So in total, as I've indicated, we had 5 cross-sections evaluated to develop a complete understanding of the complex burial history and thermal evaluation of the basin. So for each of the cross-sections, this is what we did. All this. And you can also see from one of the cross profile there, we identify turbidites. So definitely we are sure that there are some conventional which place which may need to be considered for gas. Surely maybe it migrated from the lower acre up to that potential, because we do see a lot of sweet spots or pockets within the Karoo Basin. So moving to the next slide, this is one of the examples. Actually, I didn't want to share this, but I felt that it's important because I wanted to indicate to you that in our modeling, we took into consideration the dolerite intrusion, where strata which are directly intruded, those dolerites have a strong effect on thermal maturity. So if you see, I think QU, we know that it's highly intruded. I think Steph can also correct me there, but we know QU, quite a number of the wells.
You're right.
Yes, yes. So if you check, the strata below the regional base of intrusion are likely to be largely unaffected. That is what we see from our modeling and from thermal maturity point. So intrusion test model, that was the image that you see here above, and then versus the base case below, you know. So here we were trying to understand the chances of intrusion which could have maybe affected the source rock. So if the intrusion were actually at above, let's say maybe at a shallow depth, and we're looking at White Hill sitting at 2000 meters, definitely chances is that it may not be affected by dolerites, but may be affected by other events that took place many years ago. And also we do not know if the hydrocarbon is still preserved in those areas. So this is our main story for us as the Petroleum Agency, to understand what could be the potential or the activities that could have affected the source rock at that particular time. So this is just one scenario or example. We ran this for most of our wells where we sort of intersected the dolerites, and we wanted to see or to have an understanding what impact it does on the adjacent formations. And we find that what we believed that dolerites could have been the problem or caused the overheating of the source rock could not necessarily be the true. So this is something which was an interesting outcome of our study. So again, now we have a picture of our geological model. We can now start identifying sweet spots for hydrocarbon potential by looking at petroleum system modeling. If I can say, it's quite interesting because we look at basin. It's just that I cannot show everything. We start with the basin analysis. What I presented up to now is basin analysis. Now we are moving to petroleum system modeling. And each of these has its own parameters, its own conditions, its own requirements, which are very important for us to be able to identify potential areas for gas or for oil. So now we're going to interesting study where we start looking at, or we start predicting the hydrocarbon generation, migration, and preservation using Petromod 2D. So we did this for all the lines that are presented, all the 5 lines. We generated the areas with potential for wet gas, and we're able to indicate which areas are prone for oil and which areas are prone for gas. And what you see in red, that is just showing that our source rock is totally over mature. It's overcooked already. So, but it doesn't mean that there is no, we still need to prove that, but that is what the model is showing us. And also, we look at the kinetics selected for the lower Ecker group prediction. Now is when we get into the petroleum, I don't know whether I should say petroleum expertise field, where it's not just everybody who will understand this. Somebody needs to be qualified to be able to make these inputs. So the kinetics selected for the lower Ecker group predicts kerogen to hydrocarbon transformation or transformation ratio of 95 to 100% for the entire basin. That's where we're talking about primary cracking to secondary cracking, which refers to when oil was formed and now was transformed to gas to such, you know. So there is a sort of models that we have to apply to be able to understand whether we are in the oil window, we're in the gas window, and what it means for our basin. So we apply those to have a sort of a good understanding for what is happening within our basin. So we modeled all these sections and with maximum temperature, and in the lower Ecker group, which are mostly in the range of 160 degrees to 200 degrees or beyond. So what we know is that from 160 to 220. So that is what is going to determine whether we are within the oil window or we are within the gas window. So transformation ratio, which is this, is color coded here, but I don't have a specific presentation of what it means. So it's a very high in most areas and does not show great variation. So oil was likely to be initial cracking product because of the marine nature of the source rock type, and it is likely to have been generated over a large area of the Karoo Basin. And that's why today we hear, even at the beginning in the 1970s, earlier researchers, they actually say there's oil in the Karoo, but that oil, where is it coming from? And what is the source? So their story links up to us because from our model, it's telling us that there are areas where there is still preserved small pockets of oil. And the major issues with the high temperature is secondary cracking, compromising oil preservation, which means that that oil that could have been there at the particular time is now converted or is now fully matured to become a gas window, to be within a gas window. So with the entrance in the gas window, oil gets progressively converted to dry gas by secondary cracking. So overall, this picture or this image that I'm showing you here, it's a bit complex, but I'm just trying to simplify it in terms of your understanding, is that the most area that you see, mostly in red color, it's the red color that I indicated, which is actually from that point up to the bottom here. It's indicating high to full transformation as expected, with the ISO lines 160 up to 220 as indicator of preservation for hydrocarbons other than dry gas. So for each line, I'm able to determine either there's oil preserved, there's dry gas preserved, there's wet gas preserved. So this is just a basic fundamentals that one needs to understand when you get to work on the petroleum analysis. So this is just an overview. We did this for all the lines, and we came up with some sort of interesting findings where we were able to determine or to identify areas with potential for either wet gas or condensate or dry gas. So I think in the next slides, I'll be presenting that. So another element which is very interesting is the risk elements. You know, in life, there is nothing that never comes with the risk. So with shale gas, it's worse. There's quite a number of risk elements that one needs to consider. So in order for us to define the optimal area to pursue the exploration for shale gas or for shale oil or whatever that we may be looking at, critical risk elements need to be assessed carefully. And this assessment is done individually, creating a common risk segment map for each of the risk elements, which means that one has to make sure that they understand the phases, the reservoir variability, and also understand the seal, the organic richness, the fluid preservation, the preservation, and the target identification, structural continuity, drilling economics, and many other, including environmental. So those CRS maps or the common risk segment maps are then combined to create a composite CRS map, which is now called the CCRS map, the composite common risk segment map. I'm just emphasizing this to the students. And this is going to highlight what we think is the sweet spot for the White Hill Formation being the main target. I'm only talking about the White Hill right here, but we've also considered for the Collingham and also for the Prince Albert. So a differentiation is also made for hydrocarbon of different economic value, which means that we'll have to make sure that we come up with some sort of sweet spot identification for shale oil, for gas condensate, wet gas, and dry gas, and taking into consideration all of this. So this is quite a busy image, but it says a lot, because for one to understand needs to know what everything is linked up. If you want to become a basin and petroleum system expert, you need to understand the whole process from one leading to the other. So the CRS maps generated for the regional hydrocarbon preservations are very important. So based on the 2D modeling from the transit built in the Karoo Basin, as I've indicated earlier, allows us to make sure that we define the areas which represent zones of preserved oil, gas, or condensate. And the temperature ISO lines, I think I need to indicate this. On this surface map that you see here, this is the temperature ISO lines, and which are the maximum past temperature interpolated from the 2D modeling sections. You know, some of the inputs and outputs coming straight directly from the 2D modeling, and also from the PetroMod itself, where there are some sort of a default parameters that one can actually use. So for the oil preservation in this study, you can see that the target of maximum past temperature should be less than 160 degrees, should be less than 160 degrees, which is the probable, which is actually above the yellow line. And this yellow line corresponds to what we see in these ISO lines, and showing us either we're within the oil window or the gas window. So here we are saying that for the oil preservation, the target of maximum past temperature should be less than 160 degrees. So meaning that it is above this line. Is the oil in White Hill Formation is probable above here. And then as we come down between 160 to 170 degrees Celsius, oil preservation is possible and is unlikely when past temperature are more than 170 degrees Celsius. So meaning that as we come down right here, where the temperature are extremely high, so it is not possible for you to find oil preservation in this region. And I can attest to that. All the wells that we've investigated, there is no oil shows. But so far, we know going up to the north, there are some oil shows wells right northern part of the basin. And you can see this is just the parameters that we use to understand or to come up to this delineation of areas that we think could be likely or unlikely for oil preservation. and taking into consideration the areas with potential for wet gas or condensate oil preservation. So this is one of the risk elements that we took into consideration. So moving forward, we also did the same for condensate preservation. And also for condensate preservation, we have different cutoffs. And we think oil might still be there, but not as liquid, but as a vapor phase condensate. And for the gas condensate preservation, the target of maximum temperature should be less than 108 degrees probable condensate preservation in the white hill. So between 180 degrees and 190 degrees, gas condensate preservation is possible. And it's unlikely when past temperature are more than 190 degrees Celsius. So definitely below the red line, we do not expect any preservation of condensate. So above, it is probable. And this can actually be proven by new wells to be drilled or which are currently drilled. We're still going to test and evaluate the sample or the gas samples that has been acquired. So similarly, this is the same story for the wet gas preservation. And for the wet gas preservation, the target of maximum past temperature should be less than 195 degrees Celsius, and 205 degrees wet gas preservation is possible, which is just between these yellow lines and between yellow and the red line. And it's unlikely when past temperature are more than 205, which is below the red line. And note that the yellow and the red lines or arrows, which these arrows, as indicated already, illustrate, they go hand in hand with what you see on the surface map. So which means that it shows you that now we are way beyond the oil window. So there are also other elements that I mentioned that needs to be taken into consideration in terms of intrusion. We have the intrusion outcrop, which is highlighted by the dashed line. What it means is that anything that you see below this line, chances is that it's not really intruded by dolerites, but everything above is intruded by dolerite, and we've seen that with the wells that we've investigated. We have the intrusion outcrop, which represent the borderline, and the white hill is not intruded apart from the above formation. So meaning that everything that is below, we see that the white hill is not intruded, but above, the white hill can still be intruded. And I think there's quite interesting story as well. The KVW one well, which was drilled by Samara, also had quite a number of dolerites intersections. So we know that we are going to face a challenge coming to the eastern part of the basin as well. However, we've got such a limited data in this region, and we hope that in future we can also drill in this particular area. So based on the modeling performed, the dolerite intrusion only has a localized effect on the immediate environment. And also there's no impact on the regional heat flow. And below the yellow dotted line, I think I've indicated already, the wells are not intruded. And we are confident based on well reports that there are no dolerite intrusions of the shales in this region. However, the challenges still remains where data is limited. So these pink blobs is just showing areas where it's highly intruded and also justified by the bilingual paper. So you can, I think you're familiar with this cross-section, which actually shows the dolerite intrusion in the north-south cross-section. So as I told you, we make sure that we justify every little input that we make based on information out there, make sure that we understand the literature, we understand the information that is published, and also try to align with our modeling scenarios. So this is another common risk map. is generated and is present the risk associated to the thickness of the candidate source rock. So here we're looking at the thickness of the White Hill Formation, and it is unrealistic to keep a too thin target based on the American-US experience, as I've indicated. In terms of minimum shell thicknesses, operators generally agree with a minimum thickness of 30 meters. We kept this value of 30 meters for proper identification and well landing. Based on well data, it is unlikely to intersect White Hill Formation in the north. Definitely, we know that there is nothing in that particular region as it generally thins out in the north. And between the yellow and the red lines, which is this blocky here, we have limited data. You can see, I think we only have two representations of these points. We have limited data and we assume that it could be possible to intersect White Hill Formation greater than 30 meters. So in this case, we rely on analogs, which means that the wells in the adjacent or in the nearby area regions. And subsequently, the data below the yellow line confirms this data. This is actually a good data for us because it confirms and indicates White Hill Formation thickness above 30 meters. So this region will be our main target. So this is the main target for assessing shale gas potential. We prepared this CRS map with the trend thickness validated at well location. So what you see there in terms of numbers, it is what was measured from the well data, the well reports. That is the information that we managed to capture. So here we are more in the field of economics of drilling. I think I thought it was important for me to highlight this, as much as it does say nothing much on the geology, but it's important because this study is integrated with engineering, environment. So I felt like I need to also look at the risk element, just looking at the target burial depth. So it is commonly accepted that a target should not be too deep. A value of 4,000 meters is a limit not to be exceeded. So that's this image that you see here shows the area to be avoided in the southeastern part of the basin and low end of the basin, which is too deep for drilling. And we can see this area which is highlighted, economic drilling is unlikely. And we have also added another deeper limit, which is 4,500 meters, which we say maybe that could be economically not suitable for drilling, or it's unlikely that one will drill in that particular region. So the interval between 4,000 and 4,500 meters represents an area in which economic drilling is only possible. You know, so those are you can see the cutoffs there and the area which we say is probable. And you know that we are currently drilling in the Beaufort West in this particular area. So interesting enough, the area where they're drilling, it's exactly within the identified sweet spots. So another risk elements considered in is fracking containment. We need to look into this, guys, because we're talking about hydraulic fracturing. And believe me, operators, the industry, even public people or everybody, they do not want to hear fracking. So it's our duty to also look at if fracking becomes a reality, which areas would be possible. So we have divided the study into 3 areas which highlights areas for safe fracking, possible and probable for fracking. And you can say that we say fracking is unlikely here. And we say because it's too shallow, and then it is probable here, and then it's also possible within the yellow and the red lines. And generally the target area should be greater than 1,500 meters burial depth. So our target cannot be below that target or that limit. So the depth shallower than 1,500 meters pose environmental risk, and depth greater than 4,500 meters also is not economical to drill. So we need to understand that we stick to the ranges, because we also worried that if we drill or we frack in areas which are shallower than 1,500, we're going to encounter challenges with groundwater, you know. So I'm actually coming to an end of my presentation, guys. I'm sorry, I think I took my time. And here, by combining all these risk elements, we now have identified a clear sweet spot for condensate and gas potential. So the yellow represents areas with high uncertainty, but has potential for both components of hydrocarbons. However, lack of data is an issue, because we know that we have no wells in this region, especially where you see the intrusion thickness. I'm saying we may be having a huge intrusion in that particular region, but we do not have information from any well. So the green is high confidence based on well location, condensate in the green. And then if you go northeast, as I've indicated, the intrusion uncertainty becomes more likely. So similarly, by combining all these risk elements and the risk and maps discussed just now, we are in a position to present components of wet and dry gas potential. On this map, the two blue dots that you see here represents the location of the Beaufort West deep borehole currently being drilled by CGS, as well as the gas seeps recently observed on the farm Rienestokop area. PASA actually conducted this gas sampling, soil gas sampling in this region, and they've got some encouraging results as of 2020. And previously we thought that the Karoo would only be prospective for dry gas. And however, based on our modeling, there's likelihood of both the condensate, the wet gas, and the dry gas. So overall, this is about risk elements and not yet the volumes. So our team right now, they're looking at the volumes, potential volumes of this, and it will be a probability study. So that will be something that we'll be presenting in the next financial year. So just to wrap up and just to summarize my story, we know that the Karoo constitutes a basin of petroleum province with significant hydrocarbon potential, as evidenced by numerous oil and gas shows. Our study, we have identified new sweet spot area for the lower Eka shale gas play in South Central Karoo Basin. And the modeling suggests that there is additional potential for preserved wet gas and condensate. This is supported by measured data and analysis from the first soil gas geochemical survey completed by PASA, and also the KDD well in the Beaufort region. This work is the first of its kind undertaken on such a scale within the Karoo Basin. This study disputes the perception that the Karoo Basin is too complex to be considered for future oil and gas. So as I indicated, that we believe this is the kind of, this is the first of its kind undertaken on such a scale within the Karoo Basin, is because we have used modern concept of basin and petroleum system modelings. I've read quite a number of papers. I haven't seen any paper that talks about petroleum system modeling. So that is the reason why I said it's one of a kind at looking at a regional study that we've covered so far. So also taking into consideration and given the challenges and limitation of the data, we were able to define and identify possible sweet spots. However, additional data still is required to further support this study. The data required will improve our current understanding and knowledge of the basin evolution. Ideally, it is recommended that we acquire new geophysical and well data in the form of drilling new boreholes and also shooting seismics. And just to give you a highlight of the next step of the project or what the team is currently doing right now, they are mapping these newly proposed sweet spots, and they are also busy looking at the resource evaluation where we are going to quantify the volumes. So we will continue to refine our model as new data becomes available. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and which includes the data acquisition to cover unsampled areas or depth, and data interpretation and mapping for further delineation, and also consolidation of the above to refine the concept as discussed, and also modeling the concept for validation. So this model evolves. It doesn't end here. As soon as KDD well is sampled, analyzed, we're going to update our models with the fresh core information. And we're also going to relook at the risk and resource analysis for quantification. So this is just a sort of a synopsis or just a highlight of the work that we did recently at the agency. And I know, Stephanie, we can discuss